The Lost Sheep and the Found Cookies. In a small, tight-knit community, there lived a humble man named Sam. Sam was known for his gentle spirit and kind heart, always ready to lend a helping hand to anyone in need. He was a man of deep faith, and his love for God was evident in everything he did. Sam often volunteered at the local church where he enjoyed teaching Sunday school to the children. His favorite lesson was about the parable of the lost sheep. One Sunday afternoon, after an uplifting service, Sam noticed that Mrs. Jenkins, the church's beloved baker, looked unusually worried. Mrs. Jenkins was famous for her delicious cookies, which she baked every Sunday for the congregation. But today, she seemed distressed. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Jenkins?" Sam asked with concern. "Oh, Sam," Mrs. Jenkins sighed, "I've lost my special cookie recipe. It's been in my family for generations, and without it, I just don't know how to bake the cookies the way everyone loves them." Sam smiled gently and said, "Mrs. Jenkins, don't worry. Remember what Jesus said in Luke chapter 15 verse 4, "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it?" We'll find that recipe, just like the shepherd found his lost sheep. Encouraged by Sam's words, Mrs. Jenkins nodded. Together, they decided to retrace her steps from the morning. They searched the church kitchen, the fellowship hall, and even the choir loft, but the recipe was nowhere to be found. As they searched, Sam continued to remind Mrs. Jenkins of God's faithfulness. Remember Romans chapter 8 verse 28, Mrs. Jenkins? "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose." Maybe God is leading us to something even better. Mrs. Jenkins appreciated Sam's optimism, but she couldn't help feeling anxious. Finally, they decided to take a break and pray together. "Lord," Sam prayed, "we know that you care about even the smallest details of our lives. Please help us find this recipe or guide us in a new direction. We trust in your goodness and thank you for being with us. Amen." Just as they finished praying, the church door creaked open and in walked little Timmy, one of Sam's Sunday school students. Timmy was holding a crumpled piece of paper in his tiny hands. "Mr. Sam! Mrs. Jenkins!" Timmy called out excitedly. "Look what I found in my Bible!" Mrs. Jenkins gasped as she recognized the old, worn-out paper. It was her lost cookie recipe. "Oh, Timmy, where did you find this?" she asked, tears of joy welling up in her eyes. Timmy grinned. "I found it in my Bible during class. It must have fallen in there by accident when we were reading about the lost sheep." Sam chuckled and said, "Isn't it amazing how God works, Mrs. Jenkins? Even when something seems lost, God knows exactly where it is, just like how he guides us back when we stray." Mrs. Jenkins hugged Timmy tightly and then looked up at Sam with a smile. "Thank you, Sam. You're right. God is always watching over us, even in the little things." That Sunday, Mrs. Jenkins baked her best batch of cookies yet, and as the congregation enjoyed them, Sam shared the story of how the lost recipe was found. The story brought laughter, joy, and a deeper appreciation for the way God cares for each of his children. And just like the shepherd who rejoiced over finding his lost sheep, the entire church rejoiced that day, over found recipes, delicious cookies, and the love of a God who never loses track of his flock.